Hello and welcome. My name is Elvita Quiñones. I am the president of ALPFA Philadelphia chapter. And thank you all for coming to our very special event that we're having today, Breaking into Tech Lunch and Learn. And a special thank you to our partners, Slalom and Comcast. I just want to share a little bit about ALPFA, Association of Latino Professionals for America, Philadelphia chapter. We are the premier Latino association dedicated to empowering and developing Latino leaders in every sector of the global economy. Specifically, our mission for Philadelphia is to connect and inspire the next generation of Latino leaders for purposeful impact in the greater Philadelphia community. We have over 95,000 members nationally. We just started in a Canada chapter as well. We do that through leadership development, networking, and career opportunities. If you're interested to learn more about ALPFA or join a professional student chapter, please log on to alpha.org. I'm really happy to announce a couple things. If you're interested, I'm going to drop in the chat box and having your resumes forwarded to Comcast and Slalom for tech opportunities. I've dropped it's called a job form. Submit your resume. We will forward those resumes for you. We also ask that you drop in the chat box your LinkedIn profile if you would like to connect with the ALPFA membership here. I'm going to drop mine in. Please drop yours in. I want to introduce our moderator and our speakers today. I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you for presenting today, and thank you for teaching us about your journey. Adria Cordova, the Senior Solutions Engineer. She's a Senior Solutions Engineer at Salesforce and our former Philadelphia ALPFA President, and someone I'm very fond of. Thank you, Adria, for joining us today. She'll be moderating. Gabriel Cardova is our Principal Cloud Consultant at Slalom. Welcome and thank you for coming. And Fred Santana is a Senior Manager of Project Management in Comcast. So thank you for today, and I'm going to hand it over to Adria.
All righty. Well, thank you, Elvita. And thank you all for being here with us today as we dive deeper into our topic of breaking into tech. And we're really going to explore what a career in tech looks like, how you can transition into tech, or how you can even progress in your current career in tech. So as Elvita mentioned, my name is Adria Cordova. I'm the past president of ALPFA Philly, current chapter advisor. But in my day job, I am a senior solution engineer at Salesforce. What does that even mean, and why is it relevant? In simple terms, I essentially help businesses solve their problems through software solutions. But in full transparency, I'm still figuring it out myself. I recently transitioned into the tech industry 3 months ago, and I'm still in training. So there's a lot that I don't know. Like so many across the world, the pandemic really forced me to reevaluate my career, what I wanted to do long-term and just moving forward. And for me, that was pivoting my career into tech. I wanted to change. I didn't even know where to start. I had spent the last 8 years in sales at General Mills and felt like the consumer goods industry was all that I knew. And so I wanted to expand my horizons. I wanted to try something new and something different. But I was so intimidated to even look at tech opportunities because I didn't know where I would fit in or what role I would even be qualified for. I had a sales background. How could I possibly go into tech? But, and I really thought I had to go back to school to learn how to code. But fortunately for me, that wasn't the case at all. And that's just not the case in general. I began to leverage my ALPFA network, talk to different individuals who worked in tech, really just to get an idea of what they did, what roles were out there. And what I quickly realized was the skills that I had gained over the years in my prior job and my prior company were actually transferable to the tech industry. And in fact, when I applied at to my current role at Salesforce, the hiring team was actually looking for people with non-tech backgrounds to be able to bring an outside experience, a different perspective to the team and to the company overall. And they weren't really worried that I didn't have that technical experience because they could teach me what I needed to learn and what I needed to know. But I share that with you because oftentimes we count ourselves out, and there are so many opportunities out there that we just don't take because of the misconceptions, because of the fears that we have in our head. And I looked up a few facts regarding Latinos in tech, and the numbers, of course, as always, are disappointing. According to a recent study done in the tech industry, 7.7% of the total US labor force works in tech, and this is as of 2019. As of 2020, 25% of tech jobs are held by women, and only 8% are held by Latinos, even though we make up about 18.5% of the total US population. Why does this even matter? Because companies are acutely aware of these stats and are on a mission to increase diversity in their workplace. If you haven't been headhunted, or if you haven't been contacted by somebody, they probably will be soon. Companies are hungry for Latino talent and diverse talent in general. Why is that important? Because now is the time to make that transition and start taking up the available seats in the industry, because we belong just like everyone else. So today we're going to hear from two successful Latinos who work in tech at two of the most recognized companies in the industry. They will share their personal story, and then we'll have some time for Q&A so that we could dive deeper into the how. So as we go along, feel free to type any questions that you have in the chat, and I will do my best to address them. Our two panelists are Gabriel Cardona, a principal cloud consultant and ERG leader at Slalom, and Alfredo Santana, senior manager in project management at Comcast. So thank you both for being with us today. And we're going to start with you, Gabe, if you could please share your story with us.
Absolutely. I got my stopwatch going to keep track of my own time, but feel free to time check me. So
You're good.
Thanks everyone for joining. Gabriel, as it says in the title, but Gabe, I actually come from a different perspective. I've been in technology for most of my life. I knew I wanted to go into technology in high school when I started programming on a calculator. Like, that was my background. But as I've gone through a career in a college degree in computer engineering and gone into the world of technology, I've learned that there is more to technology than just the cool tech, the shiny tool. There is a lot of application that is important. I think sometimes even more important, really, than the tool itself. It's what problems are we solving? So that's what I do today. So as talking about what a principal is, I basically go to clients, they have particular problems, and technology is a part of the solution. So I'm helping figure that part out. But always with that problem in mind, whatever the business is trying to achieve. So my history kind of ranges from, like, the hard part of getting in is that catch-22 of you need experience to get experience. So my workaround for that was really, I sold vuvuzelas for like a couple of months, and I used that story as a sales experience and like innovative thinking and trying to solve challenges during that particular 2-month period where I was doing that, which is a longer story. And that got me my first co-op. And then from there, I've had more experience that I could then make it easier to go into went into a GE IT leadership program, which at the time existed, which allowed me to basically travel throughout the US. And for background, I'm from Puerto Rico, so I graduated at the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez with a degree in computer engineering. And then from there, GE hired me off to the States. So I traveled all over, and actually didn't just do technology roles. So I did a Java programming role, but then I also did a project management role, learned about like agile programming, or agile development, which, if you haven't heard, that's very common now in the technology industry. So it's a good concept to be aware of, at least. But it basically boils down to iteratively developing in a way that we're giving ourselves more feedback instead of waiting until the end product is done. So doing it in chunks instead. And then the theme, I guess, throughout my career is, even either in project management or in the application of technology during software development, is what is the problem that's being solved? How do we address that? So that's always something important to keep in mind. And it kind of ties back to Adria's point about the skills being transferable. In reality, technologists, salespeople, we're all, engineers, project managers, we're all problem solvers. We're all together in a particular project trying to deliver something that at the end of the day belongs to a customer. So whether they're using the latest version of a technology or the latest version of something else, they may not even see. They just see it works quickly, it gets me what I need, in a timely fashion. And it may be at a good cost, that depending on the business you're in. So all those things are important to keep in mind when you're just thinking about the technology space. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Great, thank you for sharing, Gabe. Now, Alfredo Santana, do you mind sharing your story with us? You have a little bit of a non-traditional tech background, so would love just to hear how you started and now where you're at today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. Super excited to be here. So good afternoon, everyone. As indicated, my name is Alfredo Fred Santana. I do go by Fred to make it easier on others, and we'll probably discuss that a little further in the presentation here. But I did take a non-traditional route into the tech space. Well, let me take a step back. So really, what is tech? What's the tech industry? Most kind of associated with the IT, information technology, which is absolutely correct. What some may not really consider is Comcast as a telecommunications organization or company and an internet service provider. More importantly, we too are considered part of the tech industry. We're providing that transport to get those software and hardware pieces of equipment to work, to be able to utilize that. So definitely want to make sure we're calling that out. Telecommunications, internet service providers, those are in fact part of the tech world. And currently working at Comcast as a senior manager of the project management team. I will be celebrating my 18th year with the organization this upcoming June 1st, 2004 was the start date as a technician back then. So was installing internet, video, and voice services for our residential customers in the Philly area, actually in the neighborhood that I was born and raised in the Badlands. Unfortunately, that is the real nickname of the neighborhood. And installing again the services in a residential location and getting an understanding of what cable was at the time, a real kind of in-depth understanding of cable theory. What is cable? It's not simply plugging in a piece of equipment or coaxial cable into a modem and expecting it to work. It's really understanding the theory of that network, the hardline infrastructure, the frequency that's needed, the decibel millivolts that run through that coaxial cable from the tap to the equipment, and getting an understanding of what's too high a decibel millivolt, what's too low. There's all kinds of variables and parts of that theory that really got my attention and gave me kind of a passion to learn about this world, this cable world. So with that, I decided to go back to school. And unfortunately, as a technician, you don't really have a traditional schedule. You're out there as long as it takes to get your customer back up and running, get their equipment or services working. So I did transfer into the dispatch department, still involved in the tech space, still working with technicians over the phone, but giving me more of that traditional 9 to 5, the ability to take classes at night and online and finish my degree program, which I did, associates from Pierce College, as well as a bachelor's from Pierce in business administration and in management. So again, not necessarily geared toward the tech world or IT. At the time, I was still trying to figure it out. And to Adria's point, I'm still trying to figure it out, to be honest. But with that, I was able to, again, attain my degrees and navigate my way through the corporate world at Comcast. I worked in the national account space as an operations manager, and then fumbled my way into project management and realized that this was a space that really worked for me. Both a space where organization skills is key. Communication, both written and oral communication is definitely key. Being able to effectively communicate whatever level of an organization you're working with, whether that's the entry level IT person or the senior level VP, to make the technology decisions for a particular organization. So I was very interested in that space. So again, continue to just climb the corporate ladder from PM 1 through 4, which is a senior project manager, and then was promoted to manager of the PM space and now senior manager of the PM space, and specifically in MES. So that's the Managed Enterprise Services space. So what does all that mean? So managed enterprise services, what we do at Comcast, and specifically on my team of project managers, we work with our enterprise level customers. So these are customers that exist or have locations across the entire country. Or customers who have many locations and have a very distinct technological need or telecommunications need that we as a team, we, the sales team, project management team, operations team, we customize a solution for these customers. So really have to sit with the customer, understand their network, their needs, understand what vertical they fall in. So we support the hospitality vertical, for instance, so hotels, motels. Some of the needs in that particular space is providing video service to their customers in room, so private view video. They may also have a public view video, so they're in a fitness or a public swimming pool. So we need to make sure we're providing video service in that space. Again, different, private versus public, depends on what, or that determines what we're able to broadcast on that particular feed. Also, they may have a business office where they're providing internet service to their customers. And then we also support the fast food or retail space. That particular space, they may need a point of sale. They're constantly on cash registers. They may have hourly employees that require a time clock. So we need to manage time. So we need the software to make sure we're providing that support for their employees' time and HR needs, things like that. So again, just determining the vertical that they're in, really getting an understanding of what the customer's needs are, and then customizing a solution for that customer. So really creating a service boundary diagram with our sales engineer, our sales team, our customer, their decision makers, their IT folks, providing the exact equipment that's needed if we're providing a Wi-Fi service to their customers, say it's a McDonald's or a Wawa location and we're providing free Wi-Fi, then we're going to install access points to provide that internet service. We're going to complete heat maps to make sure that the signal for the access points aren't interfering with each other. Very, very in-depth understanding of the network is definitely needed. The transport, so the type of internet that we're providing to the customer, whether that's an Ethernet cable, an Ethernet connection, or a cable coaxial connection, broadband. If it is in a rural location, so they don't necessarily have access to a cable infrastructure, they may need a lower DSL speed. So we have to have that familiarity. And there's even customers in extremely rural locations where DSL, low speed DSL is not even an option. So we have to go beyond that to a 4G or hopefully in the near future, a 5G connection. So literally the internet connection that we carry with us every day on our cell phones would be servicing a customer's location. So taking all of that into consideration, working with the providers to determine if construction is needed to service a particular site, if construction is needed, what's the extensiveness of that construction, working with property managers to get access agreements signed so that legally Comcast or any of the other providers can complete construction at a property. So liability wise, we won't be liable if there's any damage done to the property. Obviously we would make them whole again, but all of that documentation is needed and it's the PM's responsibility to get that. Then in addition to that, just not only are we providing the updates directly to the customer, but directly to the IT folks at each of the locations to make sure they're prepared and ready to cut over the network once Comcast has completed their install. Make sure that we're rolling up these updates and providing it to their senior level or VP level employees on a weekly or bi-weekly cadence, whatever that's determined acceptable for the client. So just a lot of several different aspects to the role of the project manager, but have to have a very in-depth understanding, again, of IT, of technology, of the needs of the customers, of being able to communicate those needs, again, at various different levels within an organization, at the IT level or as a senior leadership level to make, again, those larger financial decisions. So that's kind of how I fell into the space of tech. So again, a very non-traditional route, but a fulfilling route nonetheless. So again, super excited to be here. I appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to the rest of this conversation.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you both for sharing your stories with us. As we just heard, both of your stories are different and both are very powerful. And we ask you to share your personal story because that's how we connect. That's how we find common ground and can relate to one another, with the hopes that it will give others the confidence to take that risk, to seek out other career opportunities in general. a little bit later, I might ask you some more questions about it in more simpler terms, what it is that both of you do. Just for those who are not as familiar in the tech industry, what do some of these words mean? How can someone with a sales background or, you know, whatever it is, transfer into some of these roles? But so now I'd like to kick it over to the Q&A session. And to kick us off, I want to start at the basic level, and I want us to first define what tech means. We use technology every single day, whether it's on our phone, our computer, whatever it is. And we hear the word tech thrown around a lot. It's like this big buzzword these days, but it can mean many different things depending on the situation. So Gabe, what does technology mean to you? And can you dispel some of the myths or misconceptions of tech careers? We don't always have to go and, you know how to code or be experienced programmers or engineers. You can just dispel some of those myths and tell us what other roles there are in tech.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to sound like a broken record, right? But problem solving and critical thinking really are key to working in tech. And I think those skills really apply and translate anywhere you go. So that's really the core of what the tech industry will benefit from and what you can bring to them, no matter what technical domain you're working in. Whether you're doing user experience, you're solving a business problem. If you're doing front end, you're solving a business problem that's related to how the customer sees something. If you're in the back end, you're solving the problem of how quickly we deliver what the front end is exposing. So, and then in any domain, knowing what that business problem is really helps you think about the solution that you're providing in that technical space, whether you're using Node, whether you're using React, whether you're using Figma, whatever tool it is, the tool is a means to that particular end. So if you learning about the business domain, and especially this is, I guess, kind of goes a little bit into the interview advice domain, right? But like, if you know the kind of business that somebody that's recruiting you is, or that somebody that's accepted a resume of yours is in, that can give you a leg up in that conversation, because if you're already preemptively talking about the business space and how you think you could contribute to it, or you have questions in that space, that shows interest, it shows motivation.
Can you give an example? Sorry, not to cut you off. Can you give an example of a domain? Like, when you say domain, what do you mean? Yeah,
thank you. So domain, I mean, could be like pharmaceuticals, right? Like, so for example, this actually is a co-op project I did. So I've used that experience in the past, right? If there's a problem where we need information from people doing the work on the factory floor line, right? In the pharmaceutical space, right? These are the people watching for quality control, mixing certain things, like really hands on the ground. And we need them to do some data entry related to what they've been doing or any issues they've encountered. Right? It's not just what technology can solve that problem, right? That's the domain, right? It's how do we do it in a way that minimizes their interruption, right? Because they don't really want to be doing data entry constantly. So how do we make that more accessible, more friendly? Maybe it's just put it in Excel and find a way to, maybe you have to do more work on the back end to make the Excel magically get the data to flow, but everybody knows Excel, right? So things like that are ways that you can kind of use an understanding of the domain, an understanding of what is the business problem actually in actuality, and then solution towards that end. And that sometimes that means just having conversations with people in different industries and just getting to know what kind of problems they face. You never know when those kind of conversations will come back in an interview, or if you're in consulting, if you're having a future conversation with a client in the same industry, you kind of have a leg up when you're like, oh yeah, I've heard about these types of problems in other parts of the industry. So that's sort of knowledge.
So what I heard is problem solving, Excel skills. Can you also dispel some of the myths about tech careers? I know you've had several different types of roles, but you don't have to be a programmer. You don't have to be an engineer. What other types of careers are out there for people who don't have that technical experience?
Absolutely. So even though I have the more traditional path, I've crossed paths with many people with interesting backgrounds, and talking to them, I've learned a lot. I've met people who were bartenders before they went and were like suddenly from that band to like senior technology managers, and they understand the technology domain. They spent the time learning and studying, and they're really good thinkers and really good problem solvers. So they just they end up in those positions. That was actually one of the first people I met when I started working in a past role. You know, he had like tattoos and everything, like really like bartender look. But when you talk to him, you can tell like he knows what he's talking about. He's ready to solve like actual technology problems. So where you come from isn't as important as how you use where you come from to apply to your work. Whether that's good work ethic, whether that's good like note-taking skills. There are many different ways that what we do in our current roles, if we're in a position of transitioning, can lead to you know, could be something you can pitch as a part of who you are, right? Because that's ultimately what you're doing, right? As an interview process, it's sales. You're selling your skills, your time, your abilities, your history. And in our case, for many of us here on the call, right, our ethnicity, like we have experiences and background with our own demographic that people from outside won't have. And I guess another myth that I know we'll touch on it a little bit, so I'll only graze it, but don't be afraid of sharing failures in the past. If you've had a project that you've done that you were demoing or you were testing and it fails, it's okay for failure, right? In technology, like the idea, especially in many of the industries, is we're trying to move really fast. We will make mistakes. What's important is how do you overcome those, right? When you had those failures, how did you overcome it? Did you change your approach? Did you do additional research? Did you reach out to people on your team and get together to solve that problem? That those things demonstrate, you know, resilience. They demonstrate, especially if you're working with the team and bringing them together, that demonstrates like good team building skills, good team interaction. Which when I'm doing interviews, right? Because I'm doing that today for my company. Those are the types of skills that I'm looking for. So it's usually like if anybody's into D&D, there's like different skills. You may have more of one and you may have less of another, and it's that balance across that determines like, is this person a good fit? It doesn't necessarily have, I don't expect somebody to be all into tech and all into people skills. There may be balances, and a team is usually made up of a group of those skills.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, and thanks for highlighting that. Fred, I'm going to turn to you for a moment. You've had somewhat of a non-traditional career, as you just shared. You started installing internet and phones, and you worked your way all the way up to a senior manager. How can someone with a non-tech background transition into tech from your perspective?
Great question. I think there's definitely a misconception that the tech industry or organizations associated in tech are unique. And I would say that that's definitely inaccurate. I think most businesses, especially those offering a product or a service, have the core foundation, a very similar core foundation. So there's typically a sales organization that obviously is selling the goods and services to the customer. Then obviously an operations organization that's fulfilling the sales and contractual obligations that sales was able to get commitments on. If there's a physical product, there's definitely going to be a supply chain part of that as well, or piece of that component in that space. I say all that to say, also in the tech world, those components exist as well. It's not all tech roles are not simply coding, to your point earlier, or having that real tech, tech savvy experience or understanding of the tech world. There is the sales space, there's the operations space, there's the supply chain, there may be warehouse management that's necessary as well. So really finding your current strengths, your existing strengths in whatever industry that you're working in, and then trying to apply them to the tech industry or a space in the tech industry that fits you. I think that's probably the easiest way to make your way into that space. To make it into that market or into that space. And then once you're in tech, you have the option to move around. That's something I say that Comcast definitely offers. There's a lot of different organizations or teams within Comcast to explore in different facets of the business. There's the tech side of it, as I once had some experience in. There's the business side that I currently work in, and that's servicing or offering services to our business space. There's broadcasting on the NBC and Telemundo side if you're interested in that space. So again, once you're in the company, you have the ability to move around. But I think the easiest way to really penetrate that space of that market is identifying your current strengths and trying to fulfill that space.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's essentially finding what you're good at right now, finding that way in, using those transferable skills, and then figuring it out. That's essentially what I did. I had a background in sales. I could talk to people really well. I could manage a meeting really well. That's how I sold myself. And now I'm learning all of the technical stuff, which is really fun because it's essentially like solving one big puzzle piece. And they're allowing me to do that. So advice to all of you out there who don't come from that technical background, find what your strength is, hone in on that strength, and then sell yourself. And leverage the ALPFA network for, advice. If you need someone to do a mock interview, if you need someone just to run ideas off of, like, I've done this and this and this in the past, how do you think that can translate into the tech industry? But also, as Fred said, the tech industry is huge and it means a lot of different things. There's the business side, and then there's the tech side. So under the business side, you have consulting, you have HR, you have sales, you have supply chain, whatever it is. And then there's also the more technical roles if you are interested in those types of roles. So thank you both for sharing. What advice, and this is for either of you, what advice do you have for someone looking to transition and grow their career in tech? And I know we just talked a lot about what that would look like, but what are some tips and tricks that you can share with the audience on what steps to take?
I'm happy to start. Feel free to chime in, if there's anything that want to add to that. But this one will vary, but certifications help a lot in terms of proving you have a certain skill set. But I'll caveat that with certifications isn't just passing the test, it's knowing the material that was in the test that you just passed. So for things like, and I didn't mention this earlier, so I work primarily in cloud, so AWS, and I do DevOps with things like Jenkins and GitLab and a bunch of other.
What does that mean?
So
if
what
you
that
don't
means,
mind.
Of course, yeah. So DevOps is basically like the supply chain build out for software, right? You take the software, you take the code, and you need to get it from there to a live system. I'm handling the supply chain side of things, making sure that we're testing things, making sure that things are getting deployed properly, that if we're deploying we're doing so with minimal downtime, that sort of thing. And then cloud really is, many of y'all might have seen it or heard of it, but AWS, Azure, Google Clouds, like those are the big ones. It's basically just computers, servers, but somewhere else that you don't need to control. You just kind of click on a screen and suddenly you have servers, or well, in my line of business, we just call it infrastructure. So if you're interested in those domains, certifications go a long way because those are areas that have a lot of depth and require some experience, but certifications kind of help prove like the lingo, enough to like talk to it at the very minimum. And as far as putting them on LinkedIn, they also are very frequently used as search measures. So a little bit of a life hack there. Like if you have certifications, you're generally going to show up on searches when people are like, I need a certified person in this domain.
Mm-hmm. Where can they go to take these certifications, or where can they go to figure out what certifications they would need depending on what they're interested in?
Yeah, so, and this is going to be a little bit different for front end and the user experience space, but things like you can basically just Google like AWS certification, Azure certification. Those are like the two biggest cloud providers. There's also Google Cloud, which also provides certifications. They have training portals that offer a ton of free content, or there is also content. I've used Udemy in the past, which has been great to kind of prepare for those certifications. So all that to say, if you're interested in that space, I would recommend just Google AWS or Azure, like the name of the cloud provider and certification, and they'll have a portal that'll be a top hit basically. And the same thing applies for like Kubernetes, if anybody's like interested in the more on the software development side of things and containers. And I don't know if it makes sense to answer this just because it's relevant.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
So yeah, Ray, I see your question there about advice on focusing on a niche when it comes to certifications. I would say certs are already kind of generalized in a sense, right? So like if you're getting an AWS cert, the niche you're kind of digging into a little bit is architecture versus developer, but you can actually get as many certifications as you like. Obviously, they cost money, they take time, so I wouldn't recommend just going for all of them. Focus on that particular domain you want and then expand if you want. So I would say I would recommend starting with usually these certification programs, they have like associate or like an entry level one, and then like professional and deeper level. Start with the associate one, get used to the lingo because those are already broader, and then you can kind of dig deeper if you want. And that's just kind of how I've approached my career as well, is learning as much as I can early on, and then as I found things that I like or things that I notice I'm like more comfortable in, that I enjoy doing, right? Because I want to love the work I do. That's where I started to dig a little bit more. So that's why I'm doing things like DevOps or that software supply chain I was talking about earlier, because I like doing that. It involves talking to software teams. It involves talking to infrastructure or cloud teams and understanding both those worlds. So I really enjoy it. So hopefully that answers the question. I see you nodding, so that's a good sign. And then as far as the front end, right? Front is like art. So like my wife is an artist. Like you need a portfolio if you're going to sell your art, right? You need experience. You need something that you've built. You know, and I think maybe the hard part there might be finding the motivation to do it. So look for projects. You know, there's non-profit groups that may benefit from your help, and you can give them time, and it does good for the community, and it also helps build your portfolio. There's a Code for Philadelphia, for example, Code for Philly if you're in the Philly area, but there's also Code for America. They're in many cities. Also offer programs that may benefit from a front-end developer. And sorry, I'll go to the question, but just to close out my point, look for those opportunities to build out that portfolio. And then as far as how frequently I seek certification, so mine renew every 3 years because I focus on AWS. So I usually keep and the nice thing about the cert programs is you get the higher level certs, they renew the lower level ones automatically. So I'll do like one every 2 to 3 years. I also, as you get further on in your career, certifications aren't as important. So it's one of those things where they help you get in, your foot in the door. Once you have more experience, you can actually talk to the things that better than the certification would. So you're ready to like go into the conversation and prove that you have the qualifications. So I mostly keep certifications at this point just for consulting purposes. Like if I'm going to go to a client, sometimes they want to know that we're certified. But if we get to the point where we're having a conversation, usually I can go deep enough that they know certs aren't as relevant.
Quickly on that, Gabe, for someone who is contemplating either going back to school or taking certifications, is there one that outweighs the other? Is there more benefit to one or the other?
So this, I'll have a hard time answering this one well, as far as like I went to college for the traditional path of technology, and I felt like my lesson learned mostly out of college. I learned a lot of valuable technical things, but really I learned a lot about like how to think and how to problem solve, and I use that a lot more than I use like calculus and calculus 3 and all those other classes they make us take in my day-to-day. So really, if you can find it depends on how you learn. So I would say certifications are great in terms of getting you that experience, and if you're further on in your career, you may benefit more from just a certification, which could take a few months to study, whereas a code camp or a school could take many months of investment. But a lot of this also requires being a self-motivated learner. So if you benefit from an environment where you have other people that are aiming towards that goal, or code camp and things of that nature, like a short-term course, may benefit you. It's just important that you have your eye on the outcome for you, which is how do you sell yourself with this experience, regardless of the path that you take.
Yeah, thank you. Fred, do you have any other tips and tricks, or if not, it's fine.
I do. So I would suggest, if entering the tech industry and seeking an opportunity, to research the organizations that you're looking to become a part of, to get an understanding of the corporate culture of each of those organizations. And some ways of doing that is simply Google research. But a lot of these organizations, Comcast included, have ERGs, employee resource groups, that do conduct or host networking events and give opportunities for others to get an understanding of the types of roles and jobs at Comcast and other organizations. So networking is definitely key. But again, most importantly, I would say, is getting an understanding of that culture of that organization you're looking to apply for. Also, if you can get as much information of finding what's the need of that team. So what are they missing and what can you bring? Can you fill in that gap or that space? That'll definitely give you an advantage during the interview process.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And that is also very important. What company do you see yourself fitting in the most? Well, thank you both for sharing your insights. I now want to switch the conversation and address what many of us Latinos face, and that's imposter syndrome. We often question whether we're good enough or if we have the right skills, which unfortunately holds us back from applying for the jobs that we're interested or applying for the jobs that we deserve and belong in. So, question for both of you: have you ever experienced imposter syndrome, and what can we do to break down those barriers?
I can start, sir. I was fighting with mute button here. As I shared with some of you yesterday, I definitely have experienced imposter syndrome, and more so without even realizing it or knowing it. I think it's an inherent, unfortunate situation that we're put in as Latinos, and not really seeing ourselves represented in these spaces of what we would consider success in corporate America, in boardrooms and decision-making opportunities. We don't typically see, unfortunately, other Latinos. Most of the time when we enter the room, we are the only representation of ourselves, of our culture, unfortunately. It's something that I've kind of took pride in, and now not so much. Now I reflect on it differently, was that motto of fake it till you make it. And I've constantly used that throughout the years, throughout life, and just convinced myself that that's the way I'm gonna get an opportunity into this space. I'm gonna fake my skills or experience, not necessarily lie. So I make sure I put that disclaimer out there, but just feel like I'm really fitting a role or acting that I fit into this particular role until I do fit. But the truth of the matter is I always fit into that space, and it's trying to convince myself that I fit into that space to work through this imposter syndrome that, again, it's inherent because of the situation that we're in, being Latinos and being few and far between what we would consider successful, and specifically in corporate America.
Thank you, Fred. Gabe?
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely face this all the time. I have a phrase that I always repeat to a lot of, especially early career candidates I talk to, is the more I learn, the less I know. So you kind of, as you grow professionally, your horizons also grow, and it means there's a lot that you learn that you don't know, that you didn't even realize existed. So I've definitely faced that multiple times going into to my first business professional role, going into my first consulting role, going from consulting on the ground to like more on that management side of things. Every time you kind of face imposter syndrome. And I think the important part to keep in mind is, especially like once you're in working in that career, but even before then, right? You're in the space, you're making the effort that actually puts you ahead of a lot of people, right? If you're actively trying, you're growing, and your skills, that is valuable. And then once you get those roles, once you're working in that domain, somebody believed in you enough to hire you, pay you for this work. Remember that. That's important. There are skills that you have that somebody found valuable. So don't let yourself keep you down. And a little bit of a corollary to this, maybe I'm stretching a little bit, but make sure to advocate for yourself, because that's a very common thing, I think, especially in the Latino culture. I read about it recently, and it kind of became an aha moment. Was there's a very common theme of believing that your work will talk to you, and that is what will get you your promotions. That is what will get you your growth. In reality, you need to be your advocate a little bit. You need to be confident and say, like, I did this work, I accomplished these things. It's important to do that. So make sure that once you're in that space, you are keeping track of what you're doing and, you know, what you're bringing to the table if you're looking for that kind of promotion, because unfortunately the work doesn't just do the talking. Many times it helps, right? It proves what you're doing, but you still need to call it out. It's just like a thing that, especially coming from the actual like Latin island of all Latin people to the US culture, was like a bit of a culture clash for me.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And it's true, right? We don't advocate for ourselves. We're very humble. We don't want to brag, but unfortunately, nobody else is going to do that for us. I myself learned the hard way. You have to let your manager know, you have to let your senior manager know everything that it is that you are doing, because there's no way that they could ever possibly know what all that you do. And even all of your volunteer work, everything that you do for the community, let them know. It's not to brag. It's just, you know, to showcase your skills, your talents, and everything that you bring to the company outside of your one specific job. Thank you both for sharing. Imposter syndrome is real. Fred, fake it till you make it. Unfortunately, that's the reality of a lot of us. But as you said, we do belong. We need to start changing our mindset to be able to take up space, to be able to hold these roles, and eventually make it up into the C-suite positions, essentially to create a path for future generations. So thank you all for sharing. Does anyone, I'm looking in the chat to see if we have any other questions. I guess before we close out, you both work at incredible companies in the tech space. What keeps you at your company?
I can start. I mean, I basically, I want to just keep learning and growing, and consulting just happens to be a business space where you're constantly doing that. I'm going from a client in healthcare to a client in the technology or in the communication space, from month to month or year to year, depending on how long the projects are. So there's a lot of growth there. And we have our own ERG, right? So that's something that I've helped grow and develop here in Philly, but we're doing it across our offices. And Slalom has offices all over the US and starting to expand actually into even Latin America. So there's always opportunity to learn from other people, other cultures. And there's that focus on, at least here at Slalom, there's a focus on the people, right? Because we are ultimately the ultimate product, our knowledge, our experience. So there is that emphasis on making sure that we're growing and that we have opportunities to share and collaborate in not just our technical experience, but also our background. So I get to share a lot about, you know, do a Mofogo cooking class, for example, things like that. There are things that we bring that beyond just our technical skills that make the workday better for everyone.
Thank you, Fred.
Sorry. Yeah, so Comcast, outside of the free cable, which is a huge perk, Comcast is a great company to work for, really, with all honesty. They definitely invest in their employees, and that's something that I found extremely valuable, very interesting, that Comcast, it has these programs, tuition reimbursement program, for instance. So if you're getting a degree in any of the fields that relate to Comcast will cover it. And the interesting thing there is there's many different ways to have a degree applied to the role at Comcast because of the different facets and aspects of the business. But Comcast is also huge on diversity and inclusion. So actually today, the 27th of April, is DE&I Day at Comcast, Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion Day. And there's a lot of programs and initiatives and opportunity that Comcast provides to their employees to break that glass ceiling, whatever glass ceiling you're experiencing, and help you get to that next level, regardless of race, gender, creed. So it's a great company to work for.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. I believe we had a raised hand from Diana. Diana, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was wondering if I could talk to ask my question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you guys for all the information. This is more like a general question for the IT industry. So like lately, one of the emerging trends is working with Latin American developers. So I realized that it's not only Asia anymore, they're looking at us because of the time zone and cost benefits and all that. So, I mean, I love to see how we're working on like building our IT reputation. But I was wondering, do you guys have the opportunity to work with like IT developers from Latin America and like use your bilingual skills, or do you work only with the US?
Oh, Gabe, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry, Fred, you can go ahead. I took the last one. Sorry.
For me specifically, Comcast has been domestic, just a U.S. company until recently. We've just recently acquired a company in Ireland where we will be expanding internationally, but that's not a space that we're currently in, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say yes from my end. I've been fortunate that, yeah, I grew up with English and Spanish, and I've learned a little bit of French on the side. So I've been able to use all of those languages when working in like with Paris or Canada. And I've definitely used a lot of Spanish in either software development because I've had colleagues from Mexico, and sometimes it's easier to communicate something, especially if somebody has more of a Spanish background, to get that message across. And yeah, as our business has been looking to expand, for example, into Latin America, we've actually been tapped. So like the company's reached out and said, like, people like that are actually from these regions, like, would you like to contribute and give us background on how do we grow in there? What are things that we should know? So yeah, it's definitely something that plays a role and kind of shows the value again that we bring, because we know the culture, we know the working styles, we know, there's a lot more than just the language that helps, that we have that hands-on experience, people that we know as well in those regions.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. I love to hear that, because now I believe the world is looking at us. And I think if we knowing both languages, English and Spanish, we're like a great bridge between, all these big companies and our talent in Latin America. So it makes me excited to hear that you had that opportunity of working with people from our side of the continent. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. That's also a strength. Leverage that in your interviews, leverage that in your salary negotiations. Being bilingual is extremely important, especially today. So thank you. I know we have 4 minutes left. One last question. Is there best time or season for hiring in your experience?
I can give a little bit of, so I think in general, apply as soon as you're ready. Because worst case scenario, you'll be in that process. You'll be like in those recruiters' eyes. I wouldn't treat this as like a hard rule, but many companies sort out their budgets around the start of the year, around January. So many times hiring can be more likely when there's like known, like, oh, we have all this money freed up to hire people. And for people that are younger in their career, if you're looking for more like associate or like, I guess in our business, associate, we call them associates, but like more junior roles, the summertime. So like that recruiting would start around like March and April, leading towards like May and June starts, because typically we'll get a lot of like folks out of universities and things like that will naturally just kind of blend into their timeline. So that doesn't mean they have to exclusively be college students. It could be people that are pivoting careers and are looking for something junior to just start. So that would be my only like possible data points that could help drive that. But in general, it's better to just apply when you're ready, because it gets you in that process of people looking at your resume.
Yep, I definitely agree there with you, Gabe. When you want to make sure your application, your resume is on file, so that when a position is available and you meet the requirements of the criteria for that particular role, then the recruiter has your information. They're able to reach out. To Gabe's point, I also have noticed over the years that Q1, the first quarter of the year, is typically when hiring is done, because we have a new budget and you have all of the money available until you hit October, and then it's a different story. But also to Gabe's point, for those maybe younger college student, I would definitely encourage taking a look at internship programs and opportunities. Comcast has a great internship program, and typically we do hire some, if not all, of the interns that participate in the program, if they do well and obviously show interest in a role at the company.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. Before I kick it off, to Demelfri to close out. Someone in the chat included an article on how to write a brag document. So talking about advocating yourself, maybe you want to check that out and figure out how to formalize it. But thank you both for sharing your experiences. Thank you for sharing your stories. To everyone in the audience, thank you for attending. I hope you found value in this session. If you have any questions regarding today's sessions, whatever it is, feel free to reach out to the ALPFA team. The team would be more than happy to give you advice, just, you know, chat with you about whatever it is, career opportunities, resume review, whatever it is. So I will now kick it over to Demelfri to close us out.
Yes, we appreciate the information and the insights shared today. Before we go, I want to share gratitude on behalf of the Filial Familia team. Gabe and Fred, thank you so much for sharing your stories and engaging with us today. I also want to give a huge thanks to Slalom and Comcast for their partnership. And last but not least, I want to shout out Adria and Lily Beth, our Director of Corporate Relations, for putting together this amazing event. So again, thank you to all for attending. We will share your resumes with the organizations, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a good day.